Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And finally, check out our Altar Sleeves. Support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store, including a set of exclusive sleeves featuring the Magic Mics crew at AltarSleeves.com/MagicMics. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello, everybody.
Ruben Bressler.
Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Oh, it's a wonderful night to talk about Zoltan Boros.
That's
Feeling
right.
green with envy.
That's right.
So green.
Got a couple green cards on my list.
We said nothing about wearing green before the show.
It's true. We did not coordinate beforehand. We're just on the same cycle.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yep. As in every week, we're here to talk about 10 more things on our lists, which is fun. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who is the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 retro Shadows over Innistrad block cards. Ruben?
This week's winner is Crowfall. There's an extra L in there. Short and sweet, who writes, shout out to Thalia's Lieutenant for being a staple in modern humans. Yeah, I mean, we just kind of skipped over Thalia's Lieutenant, and, you know, the humans as a tribe really kind of took off in Innistrad to begin with. Right. And so when we went back to Innistrad, we got another cool lord.
I mean, it's not just limited. I've seen Thalia's Lieutenant in Legacy, even going all the way back to Vintage. Like, you know, if you want to, you know, not only go wide, but also go big, Thalia's Lieutenant does it. And it does it so quickly, too. Like, it just turns the game so fast the minute it lands.
Yeah, it gets out of control really quickly. Thalia's Lieutenant is a white and a generic mana for a 1/1 rare human soldier. And when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant.
Yep. Yeah. So you go turn 1 champion of the parish, turn 2 Thalia's Lieutenant. The champion becomes a 3/3, and then you just go to town.
Or even just waiting, you know, that little kite sail freebooter that used to be just a 2/1 or a 1/2 that you didn't care about. That's an actual threat now with flying that can just kill you. Like the Mantis Riders, I mean, it all just gets very, very scary.
There you go. So you too could win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com by hanging out in the comments down there. Tell us what you think, what your favorite card for Zoltan Boros is this week. Yeah. Rather than last week's Retro Shadows over Innistrad winner. Well, thanks very much to Crowfall for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate as mentioned. Because it's time to talk about Zoltan Boros. Every once in a while, a little Gabor 6-Eye floats in there. Every once in a while.
Do we know what their relationship is?
I have no idea.
I don't.
Okay.
No, but I know that Zoltan Boros started making things in the first Ravnica block. I believe the first piece they made was a Ravnica piece. And in a relatively short amount of time, I mean, everyone else who's as prolific as Zoltan Boros has 10 more years of, like, they started in Urza's block or they started in Tempest or something. Right. And he's only been making it since Ravnica. Now that is a long time, but you know, nearly 300 cards later is quite the feat.
It's not been 16 years since Ravnica. It's not been 16 years.
Is that, wait, has it really?
Since 2005, buddy. Goodness gracious. Well, let's get here to our number 10. Ruben, what you got?
I'm old and depressed now. So we're going to start with a newer piece. One of the most recent Zoltan Boros cards to come out. And the one that I probably have cast the most by virtue of it being a lesson in my sideboard. My number 10 is Pest Summoning. Look at these good beans. Colorless and 2 black-green mana, 3 mana total for a sorcery lesson. Create 2 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. We also get some delightful Guillaume's flavor text from Guillaume's Guide to Pest Breeding, which is delightful. The Master Chef themselves. And look how cute these little guys are. Oh, so cute.
Yeah, I love that Strixhaven as a whole just seems to not take itself too seriously. Like they could have easily done like a Christopher Nolan, dark pests, really eating something. But, there's just an element of whimsy and fun here. And the colors that are chosen are just so light. Like, that orange just kind of pops a little bit, and you have the purple, and you have the playful gnawing on the person's arm. It doesn't look like they're actually going to kill them or, cause any serious damage. It just looks like a little love bite or something. And so, I love just how fun this is, the flavor text as well. And it's just, like you said, it's just cute. It's just delightful.
Yeah, again, you didn't have to go super gross. You didn't have to go super scary. They can just be like, look how he's gnawing on his arm, but he's got protective gear because that's what they do.
This is a plushie I would like to have. We've seen like Fabolthip, we've seen the in Kaladesh, we had like the artifact
like the goblins or whatever.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, the gremlins.
Yeah. Pest plushie. I would absolutely play.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Nice. Aaron, what's number 10?
So my number 10, typically with number 10s and 9s, I like to talk about our preview cards because they mean a lot to me. And I actually got to do well in a pre-release. I did a 2-headed giant pre-release with our friend Joe, who famously does our show notes and has become a friend of the show at this point. We did a 2-headed giant pre-release. We went like 4-0. And one of the ways that we did that was thanks to our friend Nessie Boar. So Nessie Boar is 3 colorless and 2 green. It's a boar from Theros Beyond Death, 10 power and 6 toughness. All creatures able to block Nessie Boar do so, and whenever Nessie Boar becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller draw a card. So I don't believe this saw any competitive play, but this was a bomb in limited, because what people don't seem to understand, or what I didn't understand, is that while they're throwing all of their creatures in front of this thing, if you go wide, you still have other creatures that are getting through, and being able to 10-6 is a lot to take down. And if you have ways to bring it back, or if you have combat tricks to keep it going, this is just a form of removal in a way as well. This sort of wrecking ball that gets rid of all of their creatures, and then over time they don't have any blockers, and it's limited, so the cards they're drawing are not great. Whereas if you're playing a competitive format, they're likely to draw better cards, and you don't want to do that. But I remember, I had kind of a constellation themed deck, and Joe was like, you have to play the boar. It's your preview card. And I was like, well, I'm not sure it's any good. And by the end of it, I was completely convinced. And so, if there's ever a time where you're playing Theros Beyond Death Limited, take this. It's a house. And I'm so glad that it was our preview card.
It's not a card that reads that great. You're like, oh, it's going to die. They're going to get cards. What am I doing? And it's like, no, do you have like one trick? Like, okay, you're going to blow out their entire board. And then they're just dead.
Or they're just dead on the attack because they can't block anything else.
Exactly.
Which is super nice also. This card, of course, is referencing the fourth labor of Heracles, which was to bring the Erymanthian boar back to Eurystheus of Mycenae.
I was just about to say all of those words. Just rattle them right off. You had no idea. He beat me to it, y'all. Y'all don't even know. Look, my number 10 here is one of those pieces that I like sort of pieces that kind of jump out at me, and I try my best when I'm making these lists to not look anywhere close to like the rarity or did they see a ton of play. Sometimes that's important, but not always, particularly on the lower numbers of my list. I just want something that kind of bounces out at me. And there's a couple illustrations like this that he does them really, really well, where there's just eyes that are just like piercing through your soul, like an Ophidian eye. Ophidian eye showed up in Time Spiral. It's got these 2 cat green eyes coming and looking right at you. It's a blue and 2 generic mana for a common enchantment aura with flash, which means you can play it anytime. You can play an instant. It has an enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature deals a damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So it was cool and limited, don't get me wrong, but the idea that you got the Ophidian eye and what that looks like and how that's expressed was really sweet in this image.
Which is a callback to the actual card Ophidian, for those who don't know. But yeah, this card just, this art has also caught my attention as well, just kind of going through Gatherer, Scryfall, just kind of going through and trying to assemble my list for this one. This was definitely one that made me stop. I was like, oh, and this one just feels real. Like that hood I assume the person's wearing, I feel like I can touch it. Like I feel like I can imagine the texture. I feel like you can see sort of the wrinkles on the person's face. There's no perfection here. Like I appreciate that. And yeah, I feel like I could just sort of touch that and know what that face would feel like. It's very good.
The combat trickness of Ophidian Eye in Limited is pretty simple. You attack, they have a 2/2, you attack with your 2/2, they don't block. Okay, now I'll play my Ophidian Eye. But also at the time comboed with Niv Mizzet, the first one, because Niv Mizzet tapped to deal a damage, and then you would draw a card, and it also had the ability whenever you draw a card, you deal damage and then you win infinite. And,
yeah, I feel like most of these effects have been changed to combat damage.
Yes.
And now, yeah, there's that little loophole that doesn't matter. If you just have any sort of Timmy or ping effect there, you can go wild with this.
I literally just noticed this was a $2.74 card with an $18 foil.
Only been printed once.
Only been printed once. Very popular in Commander with those Niv Mizzet decks. I mean,
they had a whole remastered set and they did not put it in there. They could have done so.
All right. Well, I mean, that's a great thing about these lists is we can realize, wow, they need to reprint Ophidian Eye, I guess.
That's true. All right. Let's move on here to number 9. Mine is my first higher on someone else's list. Ruben, you got number 9?
Mine is the only higher on my list.
I got you.
Okay, Aaron.
And it's fitting because I think the name of my card really works here. So this is a card that is in my Rakdos to Showstopper deck. And previously I've identified as a Golgari girl, as many of you know. I've kind of dabbled with Orzhov before, but I really became impressed with the Rakdos the last time we came to Ravnica. And I really wanted to build a Rakdos deck, particularly that revolved around the chaos and the fun of the guild. I wanted the deck to be very entertaining. It has kind of a demon tribal sub-theme, but other than that, it's really just about kind of entertaining, silly, chaotic cards. And no card really exemplifies that for me, or just even what EDH is all about, more than my number 9, which is Stunning Reversal. So Stunning Reversal is 3 colorless and a black. It was printed in Battle Bond. It's an instant. The next time you would lose the game this turn, instead draw 7 cards, your life total becomes 1, and you exile Stunning Reversal. This has been exciting in every single game I've played. And it's just so Rakdos, the point where you look like you're about to die, and then you're just like, bam. And then like, are you not entertained? And I'll never forget, there was one game I played where I had Whip of Erebos out and I had Liliana's Contract. And so this had happened. I went down to 1. I untapped. I was able to gain enough life to stabilize with the Whip. And then I played the last demon I needed. Nobody had anything for a turn, and then I won the game. And so it's just so entertaining. It's so fun. It's so Battle Bond. And I love the art of the person who's leaning over the edge. It looks like they're going to fall into some magma, but they're holding on by just a little bit of a fingertip there. And so, we've all seen it in the movies, that person who you think is going to go, and then they either manage to pull themselves back up, or somebody catches them, or somebody helps them up. And so just a really, really fun card, very affordable. It's only like $1 or $2. And so if you're looking for something to really just wow people in EDH, it's just such a great card. I love it.
It's a very unique effect in black in particular. I mean, and drawing 7 cards is no joke. Even if you're at 1, it's not like, especially in Commander, what are they going to do? Shock you? Like, what deck is going to kill you? What deck is going to deal you 1 damage if it's not going to deal you 100, right?
Even if they do, though, what a way to go. I mean,
exactly.
It's so gangsta to just be like, bam, and like, do you have it? Okay, then you had it. But just the feeling of just being able to instant that in and be like, what?
The other thing I really like about the art in particular is Zoltan Boros has so many different styles. Like all of his art, more than any other artist I think that we've discussed, I think that he's a chameleon. He can do whatever, just anything. But there are some calling cards, and one of them is this weird Dutch angle thing he does, where you get a really strange point of view on whatever's happening. And this is a very like Fast and the Furious kind of camera angle down at this character.
How this is the 3rd cheapest mythic in Battle Bond, I don't understand it, considering some of the other ones are cool, but are like 25, 30, doubling season 75, like it's
of course
ridiculous. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. Card's great though. I mean, like this one definitely jumped out at me as well. Like there's like that is a feeling. Like you really understand what that character, like the last little just to hold on. Oh, it's so good. Gritted teeth and everything. Absolutely fantastic. Let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what you got?
My number 8 is a card that I have no experience playing, but the art is, I remember seeing it the first time and was like, wow, this art is perfect. I don't know what this card does. Then I read the card and I was like, I'm not really ever going to play this card. But Molten Echo's art is so cool and evocative of what the effect is. I just can't help but mention it. Molten Echoes is 2 colorless red for an enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. That ability is questionable in Commander. It's a pretty expensive card, but I love the art of the knight defending what looks like a burning church to me. I'm going to imagine that this is like a paladin of good defending a church, and then a molten duplicate pops up next to her and is also defending.
Yeah, so it's not so monetarily it's not expensive. It's only $1. But 2 and 2 red for something that doesn't necessarily do anything the minute it comes into play is challenging. I had this in my Pastalic Mons deck for a little while because the whole point of my Pastalic Mons deck was to really capitalize on those goblins that ETB and make more goblins. And there's not very many of them. Wizards, fix that. We need more goblins that make goblins. Beetleback Chief, Siege Gang Commander, yes, more of that, please. Sure. And so because I don't have very many of them, I kept trying to find ways to maximize the ones that I already had. And so one of the things that my boyfriend suggested was, why don't you try Molten Echoes? And it's really fun, particularly in a tribal strategy where you want a lot of ETB effects and you're planning on playing a lot of non-token creatures. I did end up cutting it, of course, for just Kiki Jiki. But you could certainly do worse with this, and a great budget option, $2 in Commander, 2 and 2 red. I'm a fan.
I'll take it. Yeah, it looks really sweet. This to me would be like they're at some sort of Boros stronghold, which would have that lava, melted iron around it that they could use as a way to make more soldiers. Like, it's super cool. Like real flavorful card. Yeah. Maybe not the most powerful one, but I still like it. All right. Aaron, what's number 8?
My number 8's the only higher on my list.
Well. My number 8 is a super cool card. This is one of those cards that, like, when I saw it, I knew I was going to love the set. I know Wizards, I want to say they showed this really, really early because there's so much just attitude in this card that you can say, like, I can't wait to go hang out in, like, this really rethought, like, what happened when timelines changed in Fate Reforged, because these goblins are so BA, they're riding surfboards in Mardu Scout. Mardu Scout is 2 red mana for a 3/1 common goblin scout with dash of a red and a generic mana. You may cast a spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste and it's returned to the battlefield from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. But it's a goblin on a surfboard. That's amazing.
I love it.
Jam up the tunes. It's ready to go.
That's right.
Card was great in limited. I mean, I was desperately and madly in love with this card in limited. There was so much sorcery speed removal that you could just end a game with just dash, and your opponent just couldn't do anything. Or they'd have to throw a morph in front of it or something like that, and usually would have to invest more mana than you otherwise would. And you could get like 4 of these in a draft. So here comes a goblin on a skateboard or a surfboard, whatever.
I love Dash so much because I really feel like it was a neat way to deal with the problem that a lot of aggressive decks have, is that you run into this problem of you have to commit to the board in order to do what you're trying to do and close out the game. But if you overcommit, well, then you walk into a board wipe and then you're kind of back where you started from. And, a lot of decks just can't really recover from that. And so this was a really great way to still do what you're trying to do, but not have you kind of out there where you can just be, like you said, either be vulnerable to sorcery speed removal or you walk into a board wipe. And so I think that's really, really cool. And I would love to see more Dash. I think it was really, really neat.
And like being able to put the Mardu Scout in there and like act like it's on the surfboard and get you.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. So that card was great and I loved it. Let's move on here to number 7. Aaron, what's number 7?
I have a lot of fond memories of my number 7. Not only is it Golgari and something I would play anyways, but this was the Mirror Breaker. When I played Standard Jund, and Return to Ravnica Innistrad Standard, this was the card that really broke the mirror in half, because whoever could kind of stick this first could really kind of bury the other person in card advantage. And so I had a lot of really great games that boiled down to this card. It's everything I want to be doing. My number 7 is Deadbridge Chant. So Deadbridge Chant is 4 colorless, a black and a green. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. I would be fine with just that. Like, let's be honest. The rest is just gravy at this point. But if you need a little more, it says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, you put it right onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you put it into your hand. So Standard Jund, you are playing, Thragtusk, Olivia, Scavenging Ooze, and so you're playing these haymakers that can already just take over the game. And then also, if you didn't get a creature, okay, fine, you get your Abrupt Decay back, you get your Rakdos Key Rune back, you get anything else back into your hand. And so the fact that you can just make your grindy game go even grindier is great. Deadbridge is of course ubiquitous with the Golgari. You see the tombstones there, you see the ominous green energy. This is just a fantastic card. You have the powerful woman who appears to be Savra, if I'm looking at this correctly, between the outfit and the scythe and the hair. And so it's always great to see her. And again, another great affordable option for commander. It goes for less than $1. So if you are playing Golgari colors and you do need some sort of recursion that also happens to mill you, this is a fine choice.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Deadbridge region of Ravnica was one of my favorites to write for the Broken Pact, because it's literally, it's in the 10th district.
Yeah, oh.
It's in the 10th district, but it's literally just the ground has fallen out from under it. The whole Deadbridge is just a chasm. And to get down to it, it's an adventure in and of itself just to get to this other borough of the city. And it's super awesome. Also, this card was in this did top 8 Pro Tour Dragon's Maze in Rob Castellan's deck, getting back things like Sin Collector and Blood Baron of Vizkopa. And yeah, it's a really good, expensive kind of card advantage engine. You know, it's not it's on the sort of the same scale as like Seasons Past, for example.
A little bit, but it's just not, you know, consistent enough. So like,
sure,
you know, you had a Dragon's Maze Mythic that kind of didn't do much when you played it, and then when it did something, you had no idea what it was going to do. So okay, that's a Dragon's Maze Mythic for you. But the image in and of itself is fantastic. You feel that, you know, sort of glorious, you know, the spells rising and stuff's happening, and it's great, and a lot of things are dead, and that's cool for Golgari. All right. Ruben, what's number 7?
Number 7 is my first entry on the list, in which Zoltan Boros worked with Gabor Zigzai. And they had worked together many times before and many times after. And this image is an indelible image of what split second means.
Oh, yeah.
There are a lot of cards. They've sort of tried to mess with it, but really when you look at a piece of art, on a Magic card, and the card ability is split second, which means that as long as that spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So it can only be reacted to with triggered abilities or, I guess, mana. But Crows and Grip, in particular, I really think expresses what the split second motif was trying to express.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
2 colorless and a green instant with split second, which I just described. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, originally from Time Spiral.
I mean, and we thought it was, you know, like this was one of the cool new mechanics for the set. Wizards absolutely hates using the word stack, no matter where it goes, no matter where it's supposed to go in there. They hate putting the word stack on cards, but they had to because it doesn't make sense really otherwise. And this being, you know, sort of the first, I think this was the first one they showed us. It might have been a different one, but the idea that this is a naturalized, that's going to happen. I don't care what you got. I don't care what activated abilities you have. I don't care what you have on the stack. It's like, this is going to happen. I loved it. I love split second. They had the split second shock, split second naturalized, like the split second. This is just, I need this to happen right now, and it's going to happen. It's a wonderful feeling. So you don't have to print, it can't be countered, but you can show that by saying like, it's one thing and it's dead. And that's how fast it happens, just in a split second.
Yeah. The first time I ever played this card was in Living End, in Modern Living End, because you had to do this balancing act of, you know, you didn't want anything that cost less than 3, because then you cascade into it and things get really awkward. So you couldn't run just Naturalize. You couldn't run Abrupticate. You had to run something that was at least 3 or greater. And so this is typically what you would go for, because it would take care of the cages and the ley lines. And, you know, the split second was also really nice as well. And, you know, this tends to see play in Legacy quite a bit, because Legacy is dominated by Daze and Force of Will and Flusterstorm. And so I believe Lands likes to run this as a really great reply to Blood Moon. And so, yeah, this card just has a lot of really great play. I love Split Second as well. I was so happy to see it come back in Modern Horizons 2 with the sack effect. And it was just like, yes, this is fine.
Oh, it's great. And I mean, the Japanese version from the Strixhaven Mystical Archive is absolutely incredible. But clearly this one just set a mood. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, that's what's happening. We're splitting it in time and they're gone.
It's so refreshing, because this is a game that really thrives on having a response to something. And so just to be able to unequivocally say like, no, like you're going to sit there and you're going to like it.
You know, for my number 7, this is a great card that features a couple of characters that generally wouldn't be working together with one another. It reminds me a lot, you know, sort of a Legolas and Gimli, as it were. Well, as it were. But when you got to do what you got to do, you make a face like that is featured on Improbable Alliance. Improbable Alliance showed up in Throne of Eldraine, and this is where the dwarves and the fairies have to work together. For a red and a blue mana, it is an uncommon enchantment that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying, and it has the activated ability of red, blue, and 4 generic mana, draw a card, then discard a card. So it was its own enabler.
Card.
I love this wording, the whole when you draw your second card, when you draw your third card. I feel like we didn't really see enough of that in competitive play, which obviously between Oko and Omnath and Uro, you weren't going to be wasting your time with this. But I love this. Like if I'm ever building for Commander, I'm always kind of looking at this. I'm kind of keeping my eye on this to see if we have a critical mass of these cards to like do something with. I think it's really clever. I think it's a really fresh take on what blue and red does. And I love the opposites here where you have these sort of rough, dwarf battle hardened, and then you have this beautiful, the glow, even the colors, if you have the kind of the red and the brown and the silver that all kind of look on the same scale. And then you look at how they've portrayed the fairy and it's just totally different. And so, and your eyes go straight to the fairy. Like every time this card comes up, it goes fairy and then guy. Like it's just, and I love that. I love that it just pulls you to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was popular in those cycling decks for a little while. It was one of the only cards not in Ikoria that was in those cycling decks. That kind of felt like they not really built themselves, but you didn't really have a bunch of room for non-cyclers, right? And so this second card turn, you can trigger it every turn. Yeah. You trigger that every turn. You draw your card for the turn and cycle it once, and then you got 2 other lands. So the next turn you cycle Boon of the Wishgiver and cycle a Flourishing Fox, and you trigger it again. Really good control element to that deck because a lot of the threats were able to be picked off, and you could get 1 for 1, and then you're just sort of spinning your wheels. This allowed you to turn that gasoline into something at least.
There you go. Let's move on here to number 6. Aaron, what's number 6?
So I'm going to be a big old cheaty face. And I did not, I just closed out my spreadsheet. No, it's fine. I can improv. It's fine. So I'm going to cheat. I did not choose just one card for my number 6. I chose 10 of them.
Amazing.
Because to my surprise, Zoltan Boros is responsible for doing the entire Charm series from Return to Ravnica. Yep. My number 6 is the Charm cycle. So Azorius Charm, Boros Charm, Dimmer Charm, Selesnya Charm, Orzhov Charm, Izzet Charm, Golgari Charm, Simic Charm, Rakdos Charm, Gruul Charm. I'm going to talk about Boros Charm because I think that's the one that sees the most play.
Yeah.
Boros Charm is red and a white. It's an instant. You choose one. It says Boros Charm deals 4 damage to a player or planeswalker. Permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, and target creature gains double strike until end of turn. And so these are all beautiful. He's done them all. They look amazing. They've all seen various degrees of play, going all the way up to Legacy and sometimes even Vintage. I love them in Commander. If I'm playing any sort of color combination, I'm trying to find a way to use these. But they're beautiful, they're evocative, and they're just a part of Ravnica for me. Your charms, you need your charms.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, in the Boros Charm one, I mean, the way that he was able to feature each guild symbol in its right context, and like it's kind of cool. It's almost subdued in a way, but it really features that charm that you want to focus on. And like Boros Charm as a card is absolutely ridiculous. It remains ridiculous all these years later. Like, damn, I don't think they're going to top this one, or even if they want to, quite frankly.
2 mana deal 4 damage is, I mean, they just printed Flame Rift, I guess, but just from pure numbers, pure numbers, 2 mana 4 damage, it can't be beat.
It's a lot. And creatures double strike, permanents gain indestructible. So some of my Armageddons, and you're like, thanks.
No. I've definitely responded to a Wasteland with a Boros Charm in Cube before.
Yes.
Gross.
And it feels so good.
I also wanted to add that Gruul Charm was, I think, my 2nd ever preview card as a part of the In Contention podcast.
Nice.
And I remember getting Gruul Charm, and we were like, is this bad? Really bad? Turns out it was fine, but we read it and we were like, is this just atrociously bad? And shows what we know, it was perfectly fine. And it's just cool how they've sort of, how Zoltan sort of worked the symbol in different ways. The Dimir Charm is sort of like an optical illusion. The Gruul Charm is literally a burning stamp in a hammer. All of them have their own thing.
And for those who don't recall, Gruul Charm gives you the option of creatures without flying can't block this turn, gain control of all permanents you own, or it deals 3 damage to each creature with flying. So, ended up being interesting, kind of weird.
It was a fine sideboard card. You needed it against, things like fairies and
it would
Night
break
Veil
stalls
Spectre.
too. You'd be like, well,
that too.
You can't block my stuff, kill you. Yeah,
right.
That just happens. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is the art that was done by Zoltan Boros and Gabor Zigzai for a very indelible card, the original art of which is not great. And they've since moved on from the art that Zoltan did to a different artist's version. But I really do appreciate the initial Judge Gift Card 2009 version of Maze of Ith.
Oh, yeah.
Maze of Ith is a land, does not tap for mana. Tap, untap target attacking creature, prevents all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by that creature this turn. Effectively, remove it from combat. This was a Judge Gift Card in 2009, as I mentioned, and has been a Magic Online promo. But then when From the Vault Realms rolled around, they got a different artist, Young Hao Han, I believe, was the artist that they got for the new version. Mm-hmm. But I really like this version. I think it's great.
Oh, it certainly is. And the card itself, of course, is ridiculous and ubiquitous and super powerful, and Wizards hates printing it because it doesn't tap for mana.
Right.
But sometimes, and so that's when you would build your decks with Mesovitham, like in cubes, for example, you couldn't count it as a land. You'd have to count it as a spell, because when it's in your opening hand, it's not doing anything for you. Great land, but it's not going to save you from mana screw. Yep. And it's great. My God, the dark one is $50 and the Judge Gift one is $90. It's fine. Yeah. It's a fun.
Yeah. So this typically sees play in the legacy deck lands, which we talked about before. Mm-hmm. Most legacy decks don't really go wide. They usually have like one big, you have your Delver that you need to worry about, or you have the just the thing with the batter skull on it, or whatever. So this is very good at dealing with that. In the formats that do run Wasteland, you just life from the loam and get it back. It's also not legendary, so you can run multiple copies of these. You can also Vesuva and copy this as well, so you can get into some shenanigans with that. I love that this not only is a maze, but it also looks like a prison as well. Yeah. And so, that really embodies the feeling of, what it's like to stare at a maze of it and just really change the game the way that it does.
Yeah, there's I used to play Maze of Ith in Maverick, and because of the way that the combat step goes, the rules minutia of Magic obviously gets very complicated and stupid, but because of the way the combat step goes, I could attack with my Knight of the Reliquary, deal damage, and then untap it with my Maze of Ith, which effectively gave it vigilance. It wasn't super good, but that is like my big experience playing with Maze of Ith.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the way cards are worded, particularly the super old cards, because they just never took into account of what you sort of could do. They got a little crazy. But my number 6 here, I love it when you see a card that, like, not only did they go and make different versions of it for different products, they went back to the artwork, the original Zoltan Boros and Gabor Zigzai art when they reprinted it again. So you had it originally show up in World Wake, then it came back in Commander 2013, and then they made a dual deck with a different version of the artwork. But no, they came right back Commander 2018 with Avenger of Zendikar, because there's something just like it's pushing out indelible. At you. It's jumping out at you. There's that little face you can make out just kind of sort of, it's just like 2 little slivers of green glowing, and what you could imagine would kind of be a mouth, because it's making plants. It's going to kill you. It's 2 green, 5 generic mana for a 5/5 mythic elemental. When it enters the battlefield, you put a 0/1 green plant creature token onto the battlefield for each land you control, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control.
This was my number 8. This card is another iconic card in Commander. It plays very well with just about any strategy you can think of. If you're doing the token thing, if you're doing the landfall thing, you can also just play Magic. You don't even necessarily have to break this. And so this is absolutely something you have to answer the minute it comes out. Otherwise, it can easily turn the tide of your game. And I think it shows how popular it is by the fact that it's been reprinted so many times, and it still goes for over $5. Scryfall is giving us a range between 7 and 10. So the fact that it's been reprinted at least a half a dozen times, and it still can't keep up with demand, just tells you how important this card is and how many people feel like they absolutely need this in whatever Commander deck they're playing.
I feel like if my opponent ever played the Secret Lair drop version or any of the versions that aren't this art, I'd be like, what is that card? And I'd have to read it, and I'd be like, that's not an Avenger of Zendikar. Yeah. This is an Avenger of Zendikar. Card is obviously incredible. 7 mana means that your like cards that are like explosive vegetation or migratory path, the cards that ramp you from 4 to 7. Right. A lot of the times, if you're playing a 7-drop, you then are like, well, now I have all these extra veggies that I don't need. This card lets you use those extra veggies. So like the first, you play explosive vegetation, get to your 7 mana, play this. And you're like, darn and rats. I have to go make all of my plants +2/+2 permanently forever. Okay, I guess we're on board with that. This was also an inspiration for, I believe it's named Phylath, which is a 6 mana 5/5 legend that also makes plants and puts +1/+1 counters based on landfall. Avenger is still way better.
Way better. I mean, and in that standard format, they gave us Harrow, if I recall correctly. Yes. The old school Zendikar format, they gave us Harrow. So at instant speed, just get them with you. And they even have a new Harrow that's renamed. I can't remember what that one's
Roiling
called.
Regrowth.
Roiling Regrowth. There you go. Just couldn't make Harrow.
Well,
fine.
I mean, so getting a Harrow countered is the worst. Roiling Regrowth, you don't get completely hobble stomped by getting it countered.
Because it wasn't as an additional cost. It was just the effect of the spell. That's fine. It's fine. My number 5, as we move on here, is higher. It's my final higher on someone else's list. But Ruben, what's your number 5?
My number 5, there's nothing to see here. Nobody needs to, don't look at this grisly spectacle of a crime scene. Nobody needs to look. Grizzly Spectacle, 2 colorless, black. It's an instant initially from Gatecrash, reprinted in a dual deck and reprinted in 2 modern, in 2 master sets, never changed art. I think that says something. When you have a really kind of generic name and you go through a dual deck that isn't really flavored for it, and then a couple of master sets, and they kept this same art. I think that says something. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Its controller mills cards equal to that creature's power. Was never really a card in standard. Won't see any play in constructed formats. It was good in limited. It's an instant speed 4 mana removal spell. But that art of the dude's head to like rotten tomatoed against the wall, and just like the Boros guard there trying to get people to move along, nothing to see here. I think that is just, it's so good.
Yeah, and I love the flavor text of the, watch people flock to a murder scene. It means we're all a little sick in the head. And yeah, I mean, again, you have the focus here, the way that you do start with the hand, even though there's so much going on, the way the hand is designed and drawn, you can't help but start there. And then just like you were at an actual crime scene, well, then you kind of go, oh, and yeah, very, very good.
This was my number 9, because it's... it's not every day that magic cards are so overwhelmingly like literal. Like literally it's a Grizzly Spectacle. It's awful. It's horrible. Like it's nightmare inducing. Someone's head got exploded clearly against the wall and you're just getting to sit there and look and stare at it, and goodness gracious.
I do need Wizards to name a future magic card Grizzly Spectacle. Grizzly, and then have it be a bear holding up a paw to the camera, and it makes a bear token.
It makes bear tokens or something.
I also like all of the different blues and even the oranges on the victim. It doesn't look monochrome. Like it looks like there's different shades of brown and gold, and even the blue. You have the blue of the rolled up sleeves, the blue inside the sleeves, the blue on the helmet, the blue on the shoulder piece. Like all the different blues are really impressive too.
Yeah. The way it both moves your eye around, and then you're just like, oh, there's blood pooling down there, and
it's tough for me to tell who this cop is, which guild this cop is a member of. They might be even guildless. I can't. Do they have a identifying
that would be Azorius to me, right?
It looks Azorius, but you don't really see heavily armored Azorius a ton. So maybe this is a Court Street Paladin. Which I think is also super dope. We don't really see heavily armored Azorius a lot.
It's true. All right, Aaron, what's number 5?
So my number 5 is a card that I love. Obviously, it's been printed exactly once, and I feel like I didn't hear about it for a really long time. And then Hollow One was printed, and specifically Hollow One in Modern. And we had Hollow One, and then that led to this card right here, which I love. And now we can't get rid of it because they gave us a new Root Walla. They also gave us this Marner, Monica Dice, and a Kuldakar. And so this card is back in action. It goes for about $3 right now. My number 5 is Burning Inquiry. So Burning Inquiry is 1 red. It's a sorcery. It's been printed once in Magic 2010, maybe twice if you consider Mystery Booster Retail Edition foils. I don't consider that.
I don't count
it's
that.
It's a sorcery from M10, M2010. Each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 cards at random. So if you're playing the Asmarna Dice in a Cool the Card deck, if you're doing anything with Root Wallas, Vengevines, Hollow One, I'll never forget the Black Red Hollow One deck in Modern. I was there at Pro Tour Bilbao when Ken Yukihiro debuted this deck, and just the hilarious games where you start off with a turn 1 inquiry, you get rid of everything, and then whoop, there's some Hollow Ones. Yeah. And then if this doesn't work, well, then you turn to Goblin Lore and do it all over again. And so, this card really spawned an archetype. It's just a very dangerous card. Like, I remember when I first started playing Dredge, people were like, you should be running this. And I was like, I don't know, like random is very scary. But I love the art. And for me, the flavor text is really what sells this, of the, burning the midnight oil, burning through the skulls, and then you burn down your laboratory. And so this is just a really neat card. It's just, the decks that want it really want it. And it's also really good at just screwing up your opponent, because a lot of decks want that perfectly curated hand, and this could just sort of throw it all out the window, and you never know what you're going to get.
Particularly backbreaking against control decks that need like a very specific opening 7 to 10 cards.
Decks, yeah.
And then, they discard 3 lands and then they can't play Magic.
Yep.
Burning Inquiry in particular, good in decks that want to put a bunch of stuff in their graveyards, decks like Mardu Pyromancer. And also, as Miranda Mardica Dice and Akuldakar is taking over every format. It's wild how powerful that, it's to the point where it's the Underworld Cookbook as Miranda Mardica Dice and Akuldakar and 52 cards. Pick. Yeah. It could be Emery, it can be Burning Inquiry, it can just be stuff. It can just be other good Magic cards in a Jund deck.
Yeah, I haven't seen her in any format outside of Modern, but you are correct in that, if you're playing Modern, there's a streamer named Doomwake. He's basically just putting her in everything. He's put her in Stoneblade. He's put her in control decks. There was the Bartered Cow thing. There was it's not even really about that anymore. Just on her own, she's just an amazing engine, and he's just winning with whatever deck he can put her in.
I think the list I saw was there was an Emery, Mox Amber, work together kind of deck with that. Wow. It's wild.
This is,
although Burning Inquiry doesn't really go in those decks.
I mean, this card is the most efficient doing what it does, for the cost. This is Faithless Looting ++. This is before Wizards was like, you know what? We should probably just have Red Rummage, which is you discard first and then you draw. You don't draw first and then discard whatever. So that gives you more choice and more options. Sometimes you just spin the wheel and you just run over your opponent. The image itself, though, the idea of you're on fire reading things that are made of paper.
Yeah.
I like
it. Great.
That's great. All right. Let's move on here to number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is the most grandiloquent, fantabulous, important person in all of Ravnica. Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. The groan. Yeah, that's the reaction I got whenever I announced that this was my commander, whenever I made my first ever commander deck back in college. Grand Arbiter Augustine IV is 2 colorless, white-blue for a legendary creature human advisor. They are a 2/3 originally from Dissension. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. So there's it's not really Ristic Study if you don't even get the option, right? You just can't cast your things. Not to mention the fact that my Revelarks now cost 4. My, Momentary Blinks now cost 1. And oh, by the way, my Reviving Vapors, which is both a blue and a white spell, costs 2 mana. Really good for those multicolored cards.
Yeah, this has a reputation as being a bit of a stacks commander. This is one of those commanders that when you see it hit the board, you typically know what you're in for. It's going for about $30 right now. It's only been printed twice, maybe 3 times if you count the list, or if you count the Judge gift cards, but I really don't. And so, this and Brago both just have really nasty reputations. And, Augustine ended up being one of the masterminds of the original Ravnica. He sort of conspired to, if I remember correctly, it was to create something something to enact law and order. I don't remember the specifics, but he was not a good guy in the story. No. And rightfully so. And I love the art here. You know, when I look at this and I think Council of the Absolutes, I immediately think of either Star Wars or Star Trek, where they have the courts and everybody's floating in the little pods. And that's what this makes me think of.
This thing is $35 to $38.
Yeah, that's insane.
God. This was a crap rare back in the day. We had a million of these things. Nobody liked them. It was absolutely unplayable. No one was playing Commander in 2005 anyway. And
this was the boogeyman when Jeweled Lotus came out. When Jeweled Lotus came out, that was the thing everybody said was, do you want to turn 1 Grand Arbiter? And it was just like,
I do. That sounds great.
We probably do. We'll pay $90 or whatever for the Lotus to do that. It's fine. Yeah, this card absolutely looks amazing, though. The idea that this was the first time we got to see Ravnica, it was very important that they try to get all the feelings across and what it looks like, what it feels like to be in those chambers, to be around those characters, to be in the halls right there, and in around the Hallowed Fountain and stuff is really fantastic. And it's a very expensive card. I was not expecting those prices.
I was not expecting that number.
Ooh, Aaron, what's your number 4?
So we're starting to get into cards that are seeing play in older formats, you know, starting with Burning Inquiry, seeing play in modern. And, you know, this is a card that I have called for to be banned on many occasions, just because it's incredibly frustrating to play against. Just when you think they've come up with every single way to do counter spells, they've come up with another one. My number 4 is Remand. So Remand is a colorless and a blue. It's an instant, originally printed in Ravnica City of Guilds. Counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it into its owner's hand instead of into that player's graveyard, and you draw a card. The tempo of this, the fact that you're able to essentially, make your opponent do something all over again. They've wasted a turn, and you're up a card for the trouble. This card is hilarious against Strong. You know, they tap out for exactly card. Whoop, Reman. And then you're just like, well, I guess I just untap and do it again. And, the goal is to be able to draw something that's better than this, that you can adequately deal with their threat. And, this is my worst nightmare when I was playing Living End, because they would Remand Living End and you can't actually cast it, or you can, but it's super awkward. But this art is amazing. You have what appears to be, the Azorius Mage. You have the scroll with the text, illuminating and lighting up, and what appears to be, little fog kind of going out and like essentially shooshing somebody. And so, this is a really, really cool art, really cool effect, and just a frustrating card to play against, especially if they're playing Snapcasters. Remand, Snap Remand, and you're just like, oh, come on.
It was Time Walk for 2 mana.
It's Time Walk.
We didn't even know it. I assure you, after this card was spoiled, after we were talking about the set, until the Pro Tour showed up and all the Japanese guys were like, this card's insane. It was in all their decks because this card is nuts. Yeah, we didn't figure it out. They did. And then
I remember being in college and we could not find remands in all of Athens, Ohio. They were impossible to find. I had to drive up to Columbus like an hour and a half to find remands when we're like, oh, right, this is actually just the greatest tempo card ever printed.
Ever. Yeah, it is ridiculous. And the artwork itself is a fantastic rendition of what that feels like you're not doing what you wanted to do.
Yep.
We're done here for a minute. So,
by the order of law, here comes, words in your face.
Here comes a spell that Wizards, they didn't necessarily say specifically that they're not going to reprint it, but they're never going to reprint this into Standard. There's just no way. No. This card is crazy good, and they didn't know what they didn't know. Well, for my number 4, this is the piece of artwork that it's just incredibly striking. It's also in what I would describe as the uncanny valley, where, things they're not quite real, but they're not quite not real, and they make you generally uncomfortable. Have you seen the card Inside Out?
Yes.
It freaks me out how weird this card looks. It's imploding the elf's face concave, and the eyes are doing something, and the way the mouth, the lips go inward and the teeth.
Yep.
No, dude, I don't like it. I'm really uncomfortable looking at what's going on here. Now, this card came from Eventide many, many, many years ago. It's a red or blue, so it's a hybrid mana and 1 generic mana. So 2 mana total for a common instant that switches target creature's power and toughness until end of turn, and you draw a card. I've played this in Pauper before. It's a fine card in terms of what it does, but my God, that artwork is
Very creepy.
Yeah. So you play this with Tireless Tribe, and then you just, discard a bunch of cards to try a Tireless Tribe, which normally would just boost its toughness. And then you attack, and then you swap, and you also replaces itself, similar to Reman. We've talked a lot about how just adding draw a card to something can turn a card that would not normally be playable and make it playable, and also make a card that should be playable not playable. I remember when they tried to, I think they gave us Insubstantiate. They gave us something that was like Reman, but it didn't have the draw card, and nobody touched it. So adding draw a card or something can be a deal breaker. And this card, you mentioned the kind of horrific effect here in Is It, especially. This always makes me think of your dolls. Any kids here that have always just sort of played with squishing your Barbies or squishing the, the faces in, and this is what it looks like, just being able to just
some serious body horror going on here.
There is body horror. There is like content warning of it is very unsettling, this art. And anytime a piece of magic art makes you feel something, anything, it is noteworthy.
Yeah. The nose just completely into the head. It's just kills me. It's moving to number 3. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card I've never physically held in my hands, but I have looked at the art for this card a whole bunch. It makes me very happy to just, again, if something makes you feel anything, then that is a remarkable thing. In particular, the holiday gift cards need to do something. They need to make you feel happy and gregarious and blessed in some way. And Decorated Night does that. Decorated Night was the 2019 holiday gift card from Zoltan Boros that is an adventure of Present Arms, otherwise known as Present Arms. It's a pun. Sorcery adventure, 2 colorless and a blue. Exchange your library with another deck you own from outside the game. Shuffle your library. And then Decorated Night is 3 colorless and a blue for a 3/3 human knight. Whenever Decorated Night attacks, draw a card from your original deck if it's outside the game.
Oof.
Wow.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really neat looking. Like this card, I believe I think I got sent this one. I don't know. Wizard sends cards and they don't send cards to me sometimes. But this card in particular, just like, it's great when they can just go full on holiday and the bells and the snow and the tinsel and just like everything.
I love it. He's wearing mistletoe. The armor is themed like a gingerbread house. There's a bell on the unicorn's horn. It's beautiful. Like, the whole thing is amazing.
Yeah, I think the last holiday card I got was the Dismember one. I still have that.
I have never gotten a holiday card.
Oh wow, I got 2.
Yeah, like I said, there for a while it was, there when wasn't, then it was, then it wasn't. I don't know. It happens and it happens. Who knows?
Or no, I got 3. I got the pie one, and then I got this, and then I got the Mishra's Factory. So
there you go. All right, so let's move on here to number 3 for Aaron. What you got?
So we went from noses being sucked in your face to noses being pressed against the glass. This was a card that kind of snuck into M21 and immediately set off red flags as to this being something that Goblin decks would want, and took Goblins in a really neat direction. Not only did it give Goblins card advantage, but it also gave Goblins the ability to kind of turn into this sort of combo deck that could play, with this really devastating chain of Mog Fanatic, this Kiki Jiki, and things like that, and put Goblins back on the map. It became a tier 1.5 tier 2 deck in Modern. It brought new life back into the archetype for Legacy as well, and people even tried to do it in Vintage too. My number 3 is Conspicuous Snoop. So Conspicuous Snoop is 2 red. It was printed in Corset 2021. Creature Goblin Rogue with 2 power, 2 toughness. You play with the top card of your library reveal. You can cast Goblin spells. Note it does not have to be Goblin creatures. So Goblin Bombardment, things like that, from the top of your library. And as long as the top card of your library is a Goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card. So you put Kiki Jiki on top of your library, well, you now have a Kiki Jiki. And so there's a number of ways that you can do this. You can either make a bunch of things and make a really big Muxus. You can also make a bunch of things and then Mog Fanatic. There's a number of ways that you can win the game with this card, but it's also just a fine value engine as well. And so a very exciting card, very fun card. The art is very Goblin-like, of a Goblin looking at something they're obviously not supposed to. You have the person that's like, oh no, like just the disappointed human of just like, oh no. And you have the way that the face looks, you have the hands on the window, the way that the window's kind of dirty. There's just so much going on with this card, and it's so goblin.
I mean, yeah, right. And do note that goblin spells need to have the type goblin, so goblin bombardment wouldn't, but like Tarfire, which is a
Augur Shenanigans would.
Augur Shenanigans, yeah. Again, the tribal stuff they did for a minute. But this card in conjunction with what's the 4-mana guy that puts tokens equal to the number of goblins you have?
Krenko Mob Boss.
Yeah. So Krenko on top of your deck, and you pause it on Arena during your upkeep so you can use its ability, and then you draw it, and then you play it, and it has a haste because of the Lord and yada yada yada. Conspicuous Snoop. It's just one of those cards that like Goblin needed that extra little bit of advantage, that little bit of sneaking in there. Well, snooping in there.
Yeah, it needed. So I remember playing Goblins before this came out, and you couldn't there wasn't a 2-drop Goblin good enough.
Right.
Other than Goblin Instigator. You needed a second one. And so I was splashing green for Zerta Goblin, and that didn't feel really good. You could splash black. There was another black Goblin that was fine, but splashing a color didn't feel really good. And then they printed Conspicuous Snoop, which was actively the best non-legendary Goblin in the deck.
Oh, yeah.
And you could do some stupid things with this card.
Yeah.
Like play turn 2 Snoop, turn 3, play your Lord. If there's a Krenko on top, make a bunch of tokens, or you can chain with Skirk Prospector. I mean, there were just so many cool things that you could do with this thing.
Right. It's one of those where, like, you know, the first 2 abilities are cool. It's that third ability that just puts it way over the top, because giving it all the activated abilities just like blows up the possibilities. And the real explosiveness of the Goblin deck is when something like that happens. You're like, oh God, they shuffled and now this is on top and they did that, and they can play this and they did this, and they just go completely nuts because Snoop has that advantage built in. It's fantastic. For my number 3 here, this is one of my favorite, my favorite new cards, super new. And it's also one of those cards that I feel like what happened was retailers kind of put a superly high number on it kind of as a joke, and then it just never went away, because I'm not sure what world we can keep paying $70 for a Ragavan Nimble Pilferer.
Yeah.
But the
Ragavan. Yeah.
The super sweet extended art Ragavan done by Zoltan Boros is amazing and just so cool. And you can really get that sort of curiosity shows up in there. And what he's looking at, he's pilfering through stuff, which is great. This card is absolutely amazing. And I still think definitely in line with one of the best 1-drops of all time. My God, they made it a mythic. Why did you do that? It's a red mana for a 2/1 mythic legendary monkey pirate. Literally the only thing wrong with it is that it's legendary. When it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, but we're not even done, because it has dash of a red and generic mana, where you can just dash it in there and bring it back to your hand at end of turn. Again, you're getting 2 treasures and you're getting cards off the top of their deck, as long as it's not being blocked. And again, on turn 1, this is what I want. Every game ever in my life, I want to be doing this. Getting mana, getting cards. Thank you.
This is another card that just seems to be good in everything. I've seen this in Death Shadow. I've seen this in Delver. I've seen this in Stoneblade decks. It's been compared to Deathrite Shaman with the way that it sort of ramps you without really ramping you. And so, the card advantage that it gives you, I mean, this is just a card that has made an immediate impact on multiple formats, and even breaking into Vintage. I've seen it play in Vintage as well. And it's just hilarious.
I've seen a sneak and show deck.
Yep.
With Ragavan.
Yep.
Because
it makes mana and draws cards.
That's exactly makes mana draw cards. Like the screenshots are also hilarious, because you go turn 1 Ragavan, and then turn 2 you play your opponent's Monastery Mentor or something ridiculous with the treasure token in the land. And it's, this card's insane. I am desperately waiting for the day that I can get one to put into my Itali Commander deck, because I bet this card being a 1/1 in Commander, or a 1-drop in Commander where nobody has blockers, that sounds like a good time to me.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I can see these arguments of, do I want Sol Ring or do I want Ragavan on turn 1 the most,
Yeah.
Because damn, this thing gets going real fast. Let's move on here to number 2. Aaron, what's number 2?
So my number 2 is a card that has seen play going all the way up to vintage, I believe. I think of this whenever I think of mono blue Tron and whenever I think of lantern control, because if you're trying to deal with enchantments, nothing's more annoying than seeing this card and seeing all of your work go to waste. It was recently reprinted in double masters, and thank God it was. It's down to about $7 or $8 right now. My number 2 is Academy Ruins. So Academy Ruins is a legendary land, originally printed in Time Spiral, I believe, and you can tap it for a colorless. You can also pay 1 and a blue and tap it and put target artifact card from your graveyard on top of your library. And so if you're playing lantern control, you're probably doing the Ghoul Collar Bell, Lantern, or Codex Shredder thing. And so, the things you want are going to be in your graveyard. And so this puts them on top of your library. This also can be done defensively or in a response to ways to destroy your lock. You can sort of bring everything back again. Just a really, really frustrating card to have to deal with. Beautiful art as well. You have what appears to be underwater. And so you see this sort of Atlantis looking place with the ruins, and you have the shot, the very, very close shot of the ruins, and you have the ruins in the distance as well. You have the light coming down from the water. Just a really, really beautiful card, and just very, very annoying. Like there have been so many times where I played against artifact decks, and we are seeing a bit of a resurgence in artifact decks. We are seeing the return of Affinity. We are seeing the return of sort of Emery Karn Echo decks. And so this card fits in really, really nicely with that. But it just feels hopeless when, you're staring at your Ancient Grudge and you're like, I've got it. And you're like, it doesn't make a difference.
But it's great that way. I mean, as what happened to the Tolarian Academy, now we know the effect is super powerful. It still deals with artifacts. This card was getting stupidly expensive there for a minute, like $40, $50. It was getting crazy. So like having this as a newly reprinted card is fantastic. You can get a super cool extended art version, but I certainly like the OG Zoltan Boros Kaborzixi showing us what happened after all those years. Yeah. All right. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is one of the first jaw-dropping arts that I can remember. There were a lot of really excellent callbacks, or a lot of really excellent references in the original Time Spiral, but one that I saw the art and was like, oh, that's okay. And then I looked again and was like, wait a second. That's the pristine version of the cities in the reflection of Vesuva. And it was just shocking to me to look at that art. Vesuva is originally from Time Spiral, reprinted in Time Spiral Remastered, and you may have Vesuva enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land on the battlefield. Which
is a hell of a Magic card.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just straight up. Right now, anywhere from $12 to $36, depending on which flavor you want. This card got super expensive as well. Hell, still kind of is in many ways. But I think it almost looks like the City of Brass is what's reflected there. But who knows?
So
it could be anything.
So I think that the City of Brass is partially. So I don't know if that's canonically the City of Brass. I do know that the same artists, Zoltan, Boros, and Kaborzixi, did the art for Isle of Vesuva, which is a plane chase plane that shows Vesuva during its heyday, which was the capital city of shapeshifters and shape changers. And you can definitely see the shining sun and brass-like colors in the reflection of the now decrepit ancient city.
And
I love the colors of this. I love the blue and the water below. You have the blue kind of transitioning to a green and aqua, and then the purple. It's rare that you see a purple sky, I feel. And so the way that this is done, you have what's happening in the background. You have the one structure, the kind of the land gathering in the second, and you have the water and the things going around. There's so much going on here, and it's so vibrant and it's so beautiful, and it's just cool colors. You see a little bit of yellow in the water, but this is all cool colors, and they're all beautiful. And to top it off, you have sort of the Visa tagline in the flavor text, which is so good. And so another card that sees play in Legacy lands. This is a copy of anything you want it to be. It's another Wasteland, it's another Thespian stage, it's another Mesovitham. And so the putting that ability, a clone ability on a land, essentially is very, very good.
Like, we've got it 4 different times, 4 different printings, and when it has the same art, that always means something, and when it has the same flavor text, it is everywhere you've ever been, is also important, because that flavor text is fantastic. All right. So for my number two was a card that was printed fairly long ago, but it was also one of the first cards that I saw from the set that just like, I was like, oh wow, there's just so much kind of going on with it. I felt it was really interesting, really creative, really fun to kind of look at all of the really interesting little details that pop out at you when you check out Wheel of Sun and Moon.
Yep.
It is a 2 Celestia mana, green or white mana. So 2 mana for a rare enchantment aura. The thing is $20 because it was from a rare from Shadowmoor. You enchant a player, and if a card will be put into enchanted player's graveyard from anywhere, instead that card is revealed and put on the bottom of that player's library. Obviously the bane of one Miss Campbell, but it's still a really cool card and a really cool effect, and I think it's great. It looks really cool.
This was my number 9.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, game has to respect game. I've seen every tool out there to try to deal with graveyards. And, this is a really fresh take on that because it doesn't exile them. I am getting the cards back. They're just going right into my library and there's nothing I can do about that. And you can also do it to yourself as well if you want to kind of keep your deck going and you don't want to deck yourself. That's a thing. This is a beautiful card as well. I love this kind of reminds me of Hellboy 2, but with the elves. Like you have the gold and the green and the different kinds of green. You have the elf on the bottom right. You have the elf on the top left, who I assume are the sun and moon. This is just beautiful. Like this looks like something you would see on a piece of fabric or on a piece of furniture. Like this is just so vibrant. I love the emerald of this. This used to see play in Enchantress decks, as a way to, now you just play Rest in Peace, of course. But yeah, this was a card that we used to have to think about back in the day. And I just have a great deal of respect for this card.
Yeah, I mean, this card's amazing. There's a reason why it's my number 9. The art itself is sort of a talisman kind of art piece, like a lot of the mana reflection or the reflection cycle, where it is designed to be looked at like an art piece. This is not a slice of life. This is not an action happening.
Right.
This is very specifically like above a doorway or something like that. And I think that that's incredible.
Yeah, this is definitely, the art description was like, it's going to get weird and we're going to just do whatever. And maybe it's, it's the same on both sides. And
tells the story of how, the Great Aurora is a day-night cycle. The Wheel of the Sun and Moon sort of reflects that overall oeuvre of the change. Every life ends, but life itself never does, as the flavor text. And I think it really tells the story beautifully.
There you go. All right, let's move on here to our number 1. Aaron, what's your number 1?
So my number 1 may not look like much, and it doesn't see play in very many decks, but it has a very unique effect. And if it's good enough to be an Oath of Druids target in Vintage, that's saying something, because there are a lot of creatures that you could Oath into, but sometimes you just need a Blazing Archon. My number 1 is Blazing Archon.
Nice.
So Blazing Archon is 6 colorless and 3 white, but if you do it right, you're not paying for it. And it's an Archon, creature type Archon with 5 power and 6 toughness, originally printed in Ravnica, City of Guilds. It has flying, and it's very simple. It just says creatures can't attack you. This is a hilarious card. This sees play in Reanimator decks. It can see play in Show and Tell decks as well if you're playing against any sort of aggressive deck. It also has evasion, so it's very easy to just sort of knock your opponent out or lock them out, and you just kill them with a 5/6. That can be very difficult to deal with. And so beautiful card. You have this sort of regal, majestic lion. You have the kind of blind justice looking Archon on its back. You have the fire that appears to be like kind of, they're either causing it or they're following it. You have the gold shimmer of the shield, the scales of justice on it. The lion has a headpiece as well. It's just a glorious card. Different shades of yellow and red, but it just feels so good to just be able to drop this and just be like, leave me alone. I have it in my Marchesa deck as well in EDH, because if the game does run long and you don't want people to take the Monarch, you just make it so they can't attack you. Like, this is just a one-of-a-kind card.
This was my number 5. I feel like it's just one of the most indelible images of the era at the time, because part of it is you got to put yourself in a situation where you had Affinity that ruined everything. The party was over. You had Champions of Kamigawa block, which was just kind of lame sauce for the majority of it, beyond a few like stupid mistakes or whatever. And then finally that fall, you were like, okay, we're going to get a really exciting set, and you got like Shocklands coming up, and you got all these cool guilds and all this cool multicolor stuff, and look at this awesome monocolor thing that's doing something you've never seen before. Super cool flying fatty you can reanimate. Oh my god, creatures can't attack you. Like, we hadn't seen anything like that back then. It was really cool, really excited, and I just like, I'll never forget this image in terms of associating it with Ravnica.
Yeah, the art is so like, it is the platonic ideal of what you picture in your head when you think of a Archon of Justice, right? It's got the closed like the closed eyes, but nevertheless charging forward based on faith. It's got the plain gold shield with the scales of justice. It's perfect.
Yeah. And it's funny because when Persist was spoiled for Modern Horizons 2 and Unmarked Grave, you know, I remember seeing people that are like, what are we going to do with a non-legendary?
Right.
And I was like, hello.
Yeah.
Prowess decks are everywhere right now. I mean, this is hilarious against the prowess decks. Bogles, how's Bogles going to deal with this? You have Infect. You have these very aggressive decks that just can't deal with this. Yeah. And so Modern Dredge, this can be difficult for them to deal with as well. And so being able to cheat this out really, really on, this is a really great example of a non-legendary reanimation target that, you know, if you catch the right deck, they just can't deal with it.
There you go. All right, Ruben, what's your number one?
My number one is also a mono white card. Mono white coming in with the wins this week. I remember seeing this art and just like staring at it and being like, how creative. Like, I would never have thought to portray the concept of a mirror entity in this way. I would have never, it would have never occurred to me to tell a story in this way. And I just, every time I look at it, I think that it's brilliant. 2 colorless and a white, creature shapeshifter, illustrated by Zoltan, Boros, and Gabor Zigzai. It's a 1/1 with Changeling, which is this creature is every creature type. And it has an activated ability of X: until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So in practice, I played this primarily in decks like Kithkin, where I would have a turn 2 Wizensen, I would play a mirror entity, and then I'd turn all my creatures into Wizensens, particularly those Spectral Procession tokens. This also comboed alongside Body Double and Venser and Revelark to bounce all your opponent's stuff, or you could do it with even Riftwatcher and gain infinite life. There were like weird combos with mirror entity where you'd put the X ability for 0 on the stack 1,000,000 times and then like Revelark back and forth with Body Double.
You do a loop of something and
But also it's just good. It's just a card by itself that even if you're not doing literally anything else, like by itself on the board, and you just have 6 lands, like you're still fine with a mirror entity.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about this art. This art is so clever and so interesting in how it tells the story of how the mirror entity functions, because you can see these other two entities around it have been turned into it, but their reflections keep them as a Kithkin and keep them as a Flamekin. And that is so cool from a conceptual standpoint.
Yeah. This is another card that's very terrifying. This is one of those cards that can just end games, like you said. You can kind of turn it into a combo card like you suggested, or before you know it, you just have 6 mana laying around, and then combat becomes a nightmare as well. And so the art is really, really beautiful. I didn't even notice it till you mentioned it. You see the way, and what spoils this is the hand gestures. So you can see the sort of Flamekin in the reflection holding up their hands like this, just like the mirror entity is in the back. And then you have the one who's kind of looking at their hands like the one in the front. There's just so many layers to this. And not only is it a really, really good card, but just that art is just wild. Wow.
This one was definitely close to my list, and I mean it's about as clever as can be, right? Like the more time you spend with it, the more interesting and exciting it sort of becomes. You're like, oh, it does exactly. Yeah,
it's the cleverest way I think I've ever seen to tell a story in just an image.
Yeah. It's so cool. The longer you look, the cooler it gets. And that's fantastic. So for my number one here, this is also a Gabor Zigzai plus Zoltan Boros joint, but that's okay. I'd also note that I'm kind of in love with the color palette that are on these cards. And so I'm drawn to it when they have the super strong blues and the super strong reds. And you have a card that could really use some juice from what weirdness was going on in Judgment. You have the Judge Gift version of Cunning Wish, which has a female out of the water with this incredible flames around her, which is awesome, and getting out of the ocean, which is cool, and just looks BA. You go to the Judgment version, you're like, what is happening? There's something with tentacles. And you look this one, you're like, oh, damn, something awesome is happening. Cunning Wish, if you don't know, was from Judgment. It's a blue and 2 generic mana for a rare instant that says choose an instant card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand. Exile Cunning Wish. So
I love Cunning Wish. Card's amazing. I do like this version better than the old, because when I think of Cunning Wish, I'm like, oh, it's a cephalid making an agreement with a genie.
That's what I think.
Sure. And that's cool, but I like this version better. I mean, this is similar to the sort of like blue counter spells that are washing away flames.
Right.
And that's a really cool motif to apply here.
Yeah, this one has sort of like flames that come up out of the ocean or whatever to kind of surround her.
And even the transition, like from the water to the fire, like the glow of the water and how tangible it looks. This is gorgeous. I've never seen this before.
Yeah, it's sweet. So that was our top 10 Zoltan Boros cards. You'll see them on screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite and win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
We're going to move here to our final slide. All right. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AltarSleeves.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.